The Unsweetened Truth, where we don't sugarcoat anything. This podcast is for the business owners, entrepreneurs, truth seekers, the rufflers of the feathers, the risk takers, and major decision makers with some amazing stories. Well, let's get sharing. Hi, everybody. So this is Bill Sutton, the Vice President of Customer Experience with Mowery Construction. I wanted to invite him onto the podcast. He has a topic that he's really passionate about, and that is leadership and authenticity. So, Bill, without further ado, I wanted to introduce you to everybody and just get started.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, and congrats on your new podcast. This is a really cool format, and I look forward to seeing where it goes for you. So appreciate you having me. I guess, leadership authenticity for me has kind of actually evolved through my career. When I initially kind of got into construction, and I think really from childhood, leadership to me was the first person in, or the person who gets all the credit, and was at the front of everything. And really, as I've gotten older, and as I continue to, just develop myself and teams around me and working with people, leadership's what it means to me has evolved, and it really has become more about other people than it is about yourself. And it's about serving the folks around you and helping them become better at what they do. And it's been interesting. And for those that are going to listen here today, I probably will drop a few books that have helped me along the way. So it would be helpful, if you guys want to take notes or if you want to mention some of these books. But last year I read a book, Ego is the Enemy. And it was really about, how being a leader, you really have to let ego go. And it's not about you, and it's about your organization. And a lot of times it's about what decisions or actions do you need to take that will help everyone in the long run and not in the short run. Okay. And to be a leader, you have to be able to step back and say, yeah, we might be able to make a lot of money on this project, or by making this decision, but in the long run, is that going to make us better, or is it going to be the best decision? Correct.
I love Gary Vee. We'll mention him for a second, but I love following his stuff. And something big that he always talks about is the servant leadership style. And just like you said, it's not about you. It's not about Bill. It's not about, how people can make things done for you. It's what you can do for other people. And it's not your people work for you. It's you work for your people. And how can I help you? How can I, knowing into, different details about the people that work for you and remembering things about them, and how do they like to succeed? How do they flourish? And knowing those things about them, I think is really important. So that's great.
Yeah, totally.
Awesome. So I know we were talking about that specifically. You have a couple stories that you said were available to you, but what I want to talk about a little bit is, I think with your leadership style throughout your career, I'm sure there was a time that you probably were just working for yourself, and now you have people working for you. So are there anything specifically that you can remember, whether it's stories or times that you really learned some major things in management that you'll kind of take with you through your next role as it grows? Because managing, one or two people and managing no one. I remember my first management role. Oh my gosh, it was such an emotional process. I feel like when people think they get into management is, how am I going to do this? And how am I going to, watch all these people and make sure they're getting all of their work done? It was such an emotional transition for me that I wasn't even expecting, that you have to manage different people differently. And you have to manage, I had, not that it necessarily matters, but I had a girl and multiple guys on my team. And I had to manage the girl a little bit different than I had to manage the guys. And then I had to manage the one guy different than I had to manage the other guy, because they just emotionally, they were different. They had different things that motivated them. Some were they were the exact opposite. So I had to be a different manager to each person. Do you have things that you could speak to kind of about that?
Yeah, you kind of touched on it. I mean, again, like my style before was like, if I thought it, it just came out of my mouth, right?
Okay.
So it just, I had no filter. And as me, and you touched on it, is communication styles and personality styles are very different. And I would always present myself in the same way, no matter what the situation.
Oh,
I gave
interesting.
no pre-thought to a meeting. I gave, no pre strategy into who I was dealing with, and that they may want to perceive information a certain way, or they may want to report a certain way. And as I've developed myself and gotten coaching and feedback, is like everyone is a little different, and there's personality types and communication styles. I know when I deal with certain clients now, they just want the 3 bullet points. They just want the high level. They don't want to get into the weeds.
Yeah.
Then I have
You don't
other
care how your
clients
weekend was.
yeah, they don't want to shoot. They don't want to shoot the stuff, and they don't. They want to boom, 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 action items. And then there's other folks. Again, I don't want to stereotype anybody, but the accounting types or the CFOs, and
left brain.
They like the numbers. They like the They like the data. They want to get way down into the details. And as you grow and you manage and you deal with folks, to have that arsenal of understanding how they like to function, how they think, how they communicate will enable you to communicate and deal with people on a much deeper level. Before I'm a very passionate, emotional person. I tend to wear my heart on my sleeve. And when I was confronted with people that I perceived as not getting it, whether it be an idea, a solution, I just stopped there. It was, they don't get it. They're a difficult person. Versus trying to put myself in their shoes and say, okay, how can I tailor my presentation so that it's more better received on the other end?
Interesting. So you went a little bit deeper. So instead of like someone just not understanding you, you went to figure out why they didn't understand you. And then, because if you stop right there, you could be missing out on a lot of really great opportunities or a lot of really great people. Or maybe sometimes, I mean, even myself, people have given me feedback on how I communicate. And then they're like, Kristen, that kind of came off a way that like, I don't know if you meant for it to come off that way. And then it turns someone else off. And then you're like, okay, now I know for the future how to be able to communicate that. Okay. So what did you do then from that time that you recognized that you would shut down, or you'd say, okay, there's nothing there. There's nothing I'm going to do. What did you start either learning about yourself, or did you learn from someone else to be able to kind of take the next step to overcome that? Did you have something that you did?
A couple things. Like, I tend to be a very passionate, energetic person. I think you're a similar way. So
too much energy.
It's kind of a double-edged sword in that it can ignite people and inspire them and get them energized around something, but it's 50-50. 50% of people are going to be energized and inspired, and really 50% of people are going to be kind of turned off by that.
You're too much.
And I don't want to draw the line like introvert, extrovert, but there is something to be said for that. I'm a very much an extroverted person. So when I am exuberant and excited about something, I could see how from an introvert's perspective, that's just a bit too much and drains their energy. So really, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, is just remaining fairly even keel and presenting like a well-rounded, well thought out presentation, and also listening. So I just learned to really not be the first one to talk all the time, because that would be my thing. Issue would come up. I already had the answer. I would just like, boom, spit it out. And now I've become listen first and respond second. And that's really been helpful for me. Yeah.
Yes, I definitely, that resonates with me. I had always been, and sometimes I catch myself too. Sometimes I'll cut people off when they're talking towards the end, because I get excited. It's not because I'm trying to be rude. I just get excited about what they're talking about. And then I'm like, oh, I have something, I can be excited with you. And I feed off of that with someone. But yeah, that listening and not responding, I think, is something that I've learned as I've grown and through different careers and people I've worked for. You don't always have to have an answer, and you don't always have to have a response. And no response is an answer. And I think just listening and giving yourself a pause. It is okay to pause and think about it, and then deliver something. So that's interesting. Okay, that must be a growing moment. I wonder if other people, some of the listeners have also gone through that.
I'm sure, again, I think everyone is going to evolve differently. And I think when people are finding difficulty or challenges, maybe in their workplace or maybe their career development, I think a lot of people tend to look outward, but I do think if you start to look inward and look at some of these things, how do I naturally present things in meetings? How do I take criticism? How do I manage a team? Do I find that, I bump heads with the same type of people all the time? Like those sort of questions, you start to look at and reflect and say, okay, well, how can I change up what I'm doing? And again, back to your point, like I think it's really, brave of us to really be open with people and say, hey, I have a natural tendency to like interrupt, and I apologize. Yeah. That's just me being excited. Like that comes back to authenticity, that we all have flaws.
Oh yeah.
And the more open and transparent and vulnerable we are about those in leadership, I think people respect that.
Yes. Yes. It makes you human. It makes you human. I think some people probably look at you, Bill. And I mean, I did even too, I think before me and you started working together a little bit more, is that people look to you as, oh my gosh, it's Bill Sutton. He knows all of these people. He walks in his fancy coat and his slick back hair and, and it's Bill Sutton. And I think that might be intimidating to some people, but when you offer up, which we'll get into flaws, I know that's part of the authenticity piece. Everybody has flaws. And I think some people can actually build relationships off of flaws. I know, just talking about
100%.
Yeah, there's things that you can say, oh, I do that too. Or, I don't do that. Or I used to do that. Here's how I learned from it and how I grown from it. That's a major point of why I wanted to start this podcast, is to be able to share stuff. Some people might look to you that way and think, oh, they might have an opinion of you. Everybody has an opinion of you or me, or, and then they can hear this and go, okay, maybe he is a little bit more human than maybe I initially thought so. So let's talk about flaws. I like that. I know we talked a little bit before, empathy for other people's flaws, your own flaws, whether that's within management or just being a business, a high level executive in this industry. Do you come forthcoming with those, or how would you communicate, I guess, your flaws to someone? How does that happen?
Sure. I think first and foremost, like when you're working in a team in business, it's so important to have a foundation of trust. And one opportunity to build that trust is just to have a very open conversation. Like, here's what I know I'm good at. Here's what I know I'm not good at, but I'm working on it. And I've gotten a lot of coaching that says, hey, go to your teammates that you work closely with, say, I want to work on this and I need your help. So when I am doing this, I'm giving you the opportunity to give me feedback and, self-awareness, right? It's being self-aware, and it's being open to that feedback that it honestly has been hard for me. I used to be very defensive.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. I get that.
And I've worked on that, and it's like, I associated like my effort, like I'm really trying hard at this and I'm working hard. How dare someone say you could do X, Y, Z better?
I'm doing everything. Why don't you appreciate everything? I get it.
And I'm like, but you don't see how hard I'm working. But instead, I really started to listen to that and lean in on the feedback. And that's made tremendous impacts on my life, personally, professionally. I think there's a human element that we always want to look good.
Mm-hmm.
Like we don't want to, it's counterintuitive to say, okay, here's my flaws, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, because the
It's
wrong
like,
people having your flaws is dangerous too. Yeah. The wrong.
correct. Yes. I mean, it's a defense mechanism. Like I can't let other people know where my weaknesses are. But when you're working in a team in an intimate setting, that it's critical for everybody to know that and have each other's back. So, I mean, I just have open, frank conversation. Another great book that I read on this is Radical Candor.
Oh.
And it's just really trust, and having a very frank, open dialogue with your team members will make everybody better. So again, even with clients, I find if a client will come to us and say, hey, we'd love for you to do this project, right? And it's not exactly a great fit for us.
Okay.
Technically, it could be something we don't have a lot of experience in, but I really want the work.
Mm-hmm.
Inevitably, like if I were to say, okay, great, we'll do it. We're great at that. And then it's not going to go well. And then at the end of the day, there's just something missing there, like that you took on a job that really wasn't a good fit, versus saying to them, listen, that project's not a perfect fit for us, but I know someone who would be, and I want you to be successful. And that sort of openness and, honesty, I think goes further than trying to do something you're really not equipped to do.
Well, and not a lot of people do that, I think, too. Not a lot of people do that. If there's an opportunity, everybody likes money, right? Everybody likes money. Everybody likes more business, but I think it's how you're making your money. And to me, I guess if I say I was a client and I came to you, and no matter what it was, and they were honest to me and said, hey, I don't necessarily know how to do this, and I know that I'm not the best person for this. That's a big deal. That's a lot of people can't admit that I'm not the best person for it. There's a lot of people that say, yeah, I'll figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
And then it turns into some we'll say it, half-assed project. And you knew that you were never going to be successful. So I think being honest with them up front, I mean, I could even see that getting you more projects in the future. Them
Sure.
knowing, all right, Bill's a trustworthy guy. Bill's somebody I can go to regardless, right, wrong, or indifferent, with a project. And I know that he'll connect me to the right person. Bill knows good people, and I know he's going to be honest and trustworthy with me.
Yeah. And honestly, I've gotten to the point in my career that's what I feel my job is.
Okay.
Is it doesn't matter who I come in contact with, client, colleague. My job is to set them up for success the best way I know. Mm-hmm. And if it just so happens that Mowery and our team mm-hmm. is that fit, is that solution, then I'm ecstatic, because it's a win-win. But even if it's not us, or I'm referring them to somebody, or I'm making a connection that makes them uber successful, I'm still very happy I'm still satisfied with that.
Yeah. Yeah. You did the right thing.
I think it's not yeah. You
did the right thing, and that makes you feel good. At the end of the day, it's the goal to do the right thing. But I am curious too, because obviously you've been with Mowery for some time now. People really connect you with Mowery, and with the way that you feel about management, and the way you feel about flaws, and the way you feel about communication. I guess my question to you would be, do you align? I imagine Mowery and you have to align in some way, that's whether it's their culture or that's what they really believe. Are there kind of hiccups or different things that you guys had to change so that way you're on the same path? Or when you came in, were you aligned right away? Or did it take some time to kind of figure each other out? I guess that's curious, because a lot of people, when they change jobs, sometimes it's everybody. The shine wears off after 30 days, 60 days.
Oh, yes. Yeah, 100%.
And they think, I mean, anybody will tell you anything to get you to come and work for them. And then once you're there, you're like, oh, well, okay, you don't actually really care about your people. Now I'm seeing people chained to their desks, right? So what did that look like for you? And then I guess as the future of Mowery continues, what are things that you really want to implement to make sure it's strong and sound?
Sure. It's a great question. So a little bit of a backstory. Like when I came to Mowery, it was Don Mowery, third generation. The thing I really loved about it was a like family atmosphere. Perry Heath was there, and guys, not guys, but people who had been there like 30, 40 years and cared about each other, and just really put all of their heart and soul into their work. I love that. And so literally like 6 months in, Don called us all in and he said, well, I'm selling the business.
Yeah.
So it's like you
You're
come
like,
somewhere, yeah, you kind of fall in love with the situation, the culture, what you're doing, the work, my boss, and then you're like, we don't know how this thing's going to change, right? New leadership, new this, new that. So I was really fortunate that Dave Cross, when he came on board, he was almost the same heart that Don has, but Dave has like a tremendous vision. He's a visionary.
Okay.
So like he wanted to innovate, keep the foundation, but innovate and make it exciting and more technology focused and grow and do new things. So that to me, I was really lucky that the heart and the mind kind of coincided and I didn't miss a beat, and Dave and I clicked. And what I did find, like, this was crazy. I'm an engineer by background, and I love project management. Like I love, spinning 10 plates and solving problems every day and seeing buildings get built. And so a few years ago, Dave comes to me and says, you need to be in business development. And so like sales and business development. And so from my brain, the engineer brain, the guy who likes math and building buildings and playing with Legos, to go sell was a drastic change. Like,
yeah, I don't think a lot of people know that about you. I don't think that a lot of people know that about you.
Yeah.
Pause on that for just a second, because I obviously do, because we've talked about it, but and I'm sure some others that are close to you, but knowing your personality and seeing you do your thing at networking events or at Mowery or in commercial or whatever it is that you do, you're actually very technical and you like math and you are an engineer. So let's pause on that a little bit though, of what you maybe went to school for and how you made that switch.
Sure. Perfect math SAT score. So I didn't get one wrong on that. So love math. It just makes sense to me. I went to Catholic University and got a civil engineering degree. Okay. It wasn't super easy for me. There were certain things I struggled with, but I did enjoy that. When I came out, it's actually a story from when I was little. My dad was a carpenter when I was younger, and he would drive through a neighborhood and he would say, I worked on that house and I helped build that house. And literally at 6 years old, it clicked for me, like, that I want to do that. Like I want to build stuff, and I don't know what it is about driving past something that you worked on, but it's like that pride and that happiness that someone's living in there, or some kid goes to school there every day, and you've created something that wasn't there before.
Yeah.
And it's really magical to me. Like I say this about construction, is every building that's ever been built is literally like a prototype, and it's a one of one. It's so special, and it takes, hundreds of people to collaborate to get that done. It's really a miracle that it gets done. And so I just love that. So yeah, for me to pivot my brain and then think about sales, and I like people, like dealing with people and being social. I'm just a social butterfly. So I think people oftentimes like,
characteristic of engineers, and I'll say
engineers
might laugh, they just hurt their feelings, but that typically, from my experience, that is not a characteristic of engineers. So that's very
you're right. It's kind of a rare engineer you find who's very social. But I mean, I don't know. I've had to bring a similar process to sales. At first, it was too much. It was overwhelming. It's like there's a million different prospects. There's a million different people to call, different this. So I really had to refine and become like an engineering process for me to wrap my head around it. So
interesting. See, well, that's good. So yeah, for everybody that doesn't know Bill Sutton very well, now you know that he's not just a business development. But sorry for that segue. Yeah, we were talking about Dave and the culture of Mowery and how you guys plan to grow and keep things. So it sounds like he kept things very similar at their foundation, at their core, but then he really wanted to implement more.
Yes. And honestly, I'm really thankful for this. He's focused on team building and culture alignment, right? So, and this is something that to me is so important for everybody who watches this, or maybe you feel like you're stuck in your career path. Like, companies' goals and their purpose should align with your personal purpose and what you're passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
If there's a misalignment there, you're not going to enjoy going to work every day.
Mm-hmm.
And I just feel like life is far too short to go to work every day and be unhappy. I mean, we spend more time working than we do doing anything else.
Or with our families.
I mean, correct. And that it's kind of sad to think about that. I have two little ones, and 7 and 9, and you know, when I'm home working in the office, they're like knocking on the door and they want to play, and I'm like, yeah, they're home doing school. So it's just finding that balance. But if you work somewhere you're really in line with them, and that's the thing I love about Dave is he stands by our culture and our values. And when you find that candidate that is in line, it's a home run, and you never look back.
Yeah.
And the flip side, the hard side is that if there was people there before that maybe weren't a cultural fit, you know, you have to address that, or it brings everybody else down. So
the cancers. And that's interesting too about like the culture and the core. I have a question for you, just kind of being a leader and being a manager of such a high position at Mowery. I've worked at companies before that it might seem on paper, and they've got all their visions and their words and all their little, you know, bubbles and stuff, you know, in frames on the wall. And really all it is wall art for some companies.
Mm-hmm.
And they put that there because I think it looks good. It's flashy, and it's there, right? But they're not actually at a core that 30, 60, 90 days when the shine wears off. You're like, your people really aren't super important to you. How would you say, I guess, through just your experience, and you've gone to authenticity with culture, how do you determine quickly, I think would be interesting to know whether or not they actually align with you or they don't? Because you only have a little bit of time as you're going through an interview process, or you're going through a career change, or even trying to do some of this secretly, right? If you're meeting with your high level at one firm and you're going to another, are there things that you would say, maybe that whether you dealt with it at Mowery or past companies, that you're like, okay, they really do align? Maybe you saw something that happened, or is there anything like that?
Oh, 100%. I did at Mowery. I see this, and for a construction company, like if you were going to work for a construction company, a couple things. I would look upstream and downstream. So I would talk to a client who has hired that firm and say, how was your experience there?
Okay.
Right. So your values shouldn't just be internally. They should be 360. So whether you're dealing with a client that's living, whether it's an employee, I would want to ask like an everyday employee. I don't want to ask like the 3 people that they like introduce you to. I want to ask, can I have a name of somebody else who works in like accounting, right? And talk to them. Yeah, find out how they like it or what their experience was. But also the vendors they hire. So one of the things like that, especially in the general contracting firm, like I will talk to vendors or subcontractors, and they will be like, we will never work for XYZ general contractor ever again. And I'll say, oh, why? And they were like, they don't pay timely. They beat us up on change orders, or like, you know, they're XYZ. They're not good to work with. They never meet a schedule. So if there's disconnect between, say, like what a subcontractor sees and feels between what the company says or maybe with a client. So I think it's that interaction upstream, downstream that I would be looking into, because if there's a crack in those values, it's going to be seen on either end.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's true. Yeah. Cause you meet with just the owner and HR and whoever else, you're not really maybe getting the nitty gritty details that you need to get to make a decision. Okay. Oh, I like that. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, I think a lot can be said for what do they do when a project goes wrong? Because that's where the rubber meets the road in construction. You know, it's very few projects are perfect, 10 out of 10. It's when something is missed or something goes wrong, how does that company handle that?
Yeah.
How do they deal with conflicts? How do they deal with difficult conversations with clients?
Yeah.
I find that could be very telling.
Well, just who somebody is even as a person, because all this is working with other people. So if they're not someone to be honest in messing something up, there's nothing wrong with saying I did something wrong, but it's how you fix it. Customer service, right? That's how you're different. Everybody's going to mess up along the road somewhere, but how do you fix it once it's, you know, people made you aware? So, okay. All right, great.
Yeah, totally.
I know you said you had a couple bullet points here that I know you would eventually want to talk about. Story about wearing, you said you wear your heart on your sleeve. So as you being who you are, and now that some of these people have figured out that you do have an engineering background and a project management background, you're a little bit a super math whiz, but you're also highly emotional. So you wear your heart on your sleeve. Is there a specific story related to that you could share with people, or?
Yes, there is. So I'm very passionate about sustainability, and I've had my lead AP for 10 plus years. And when I first got it, I was so passionate about it. I felt like almost like a zealot, like everybody had to do it. And I know there was a specific instance with a client where I was so over passionate about it, and I wasn't listening. And I pushed the envelope so much that they called the company I was working for, and they had me removed from the project.
Oh my gosh.
Because, so, I mean, basically they fired me from that project because they felt like
just too much.
I was pushing the agenda too much on that job to go green and do green stuff. So I that was one of those things where clearly I wasn't listening. And I did learn through a lot of work through USGBC and LEED is that while sustainability is great, not especially in this region, not everybody fully buys in and feels like that's the right thing to do. And that's, it's okay. And but if you present it in such a way where there are options and there's paybacks, there's long-term solutions, short-term solutions, and then you really work through the client to give them the choice versus trying to really hammer it home. It's a much more successful process. So that was just one for me, and it's something I continue to struggle with, honestly, is just I used to want to weigh in on every single decision. But there's certain decisions really that I don't need to go die on the hill for. Yeah. So
that's not the hill I want to
evaluate. Yeah, exactly. Like I just don't. There's not every decision. Like I used to think I need to weigh in on everything, and I really don't. If I sit and listen and I feel like my perspective or my insight will be helpful to the group, I weigh in. But I don't automatically chime in on everything, and that's been really helpful for me.
Yeah, I think that
because when I do speak up, when I do speak up, people know, like, okay, Bill, this really matters to Bill, and I'm really going to listen. Whereas before, if I did that on every issue, it all got filtered.
Bill's talking again.
Bill, here goes. Yeah. So. Well, I don't know if people can relate to that or not. But.
I think so. At least myself being somebody that's similar to you in that. I think there's something very cool about, well, I don't know if cool is the right word, but very cool about certain types of people that are so reserved. And then when they have something to say, it's like, okay, everybody be quiet. They're talking. There's something so cool about being that person too, versus like the eager beaver or whatever, that we always want to say something. Yeah. Sometimes when you say so much that people are like, okay, they just have something else to say. Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah, it's a good point. But being reserved, I remember being in, management meetings or conferences, and you just wait and there's someone that they're like, oh, they don't really say that much. But every time they open their mouth, you're like, wow, everybody just listen. So maybe that does come with maturity or self-understanding or, knowing exactly who you are.
Mm-hmm.
So that's cool. That's another tip, I think,
Yeah.
for people to know about listening.
Hopefully people can use this stuff. This is great.
I hope so. They'd like this. Okay, good story though. So you were a little too eager, and you got kicked off a project. I'm curious, how did the company at the time handle that with you because you probably learned something, you got burnt. Did you take that as you did something wrong, or because I'm curious I don't know exactly where you were in your career there. Was that a looking at yourself moment, or was that one that you were maybe more defensive?
I know I was definitely defensive at the time.
Yes.
But I knew I overstepped. And even to this day, people, and this is hard for me, but they're like, stay in your lane, Bill. Yeah. Like,
Bill.
To me, like, I am all over the place, all over the road. I want to help everybody, and I want to give ideas and help and work. And if I need something over there, I go, work. So staying in my lane is not something that comes easy, but I started to weave that into my thought process is, am I overstepping here? I have an assigned role and responsibility on this team. And when I see or feel myself creeping outside of that, I'm aware of it. And before jumping in, I tend to go talk to someone about it and say, okay, hey, am I overstepping here? Or having a conversation with someone who I really trust at work about the issue. And sometimes the person who's in that lane will take it to bat for you. And you don't have to be the person to go do that. If they align with you, they can, that's part of working on a good team is having them go.
Yeah. You need to be able to work with people that say, Kristen, you're too much, or Bill, you're too much there, and have a very sound board to just bounce things off of. Because if you constantly have people around you that are either scared of you or and they might be scared of you because you're bad at taking feedback. So that's something that you always have to think about is am I bad at taking feedback? Is that why nobody ever gives me feedback? Yeah. Right. Like, so that's
100%. Yes.
Yeah. I went through as a manager previously in a role is that why nobody gives me feedback? I've learned about myself that I've learned that I come across intimidating. And then I've thought more about why. And I've learned from good and bad people giving me feedback as to why I maybe come across intimidating. And it's that I don't necessarily need anything from anyone. Maybe I don't need any help. And that is so the opposite of true. And I'm like, okay, maybe I can be less than 100% sometimes in front of people. Like, you don't have to be 100% all the time in front of you. You can be 50%, you can be 70%, you can tell people, I need help with this. I'm not good at asking for help. And that obviously will go back to other things. But I think being around people that genuinely want to help you, they're not scared of you, and they can say, all right, you really kind of overstepped here. You did something that you maybe shouldn't have. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I was terrible at getting feedback because I always had a reaction, and whether it be body language, facial expression, it was brutal. So my tip for people who know they're about to get feedback, okay, take a pen and paper and just take notes. Don't react. Turn off your brain. Write down what that person is saying. It will, because you're thinking and writing, it'll take your emotional reaction and it'll dampen it a little bit. And so I started to do that. If I knew I was going to have a meeting with my boss, or if somebody was going to offer up feedback, or I'm getting coaching, I write it down. It allows me to process it, and you don't have to respond right away. A perfect response is, I hear you and I appreciate that feedback. I want to take some time to think about it. And I really want to work on it. Yeah.
That's great. That's really, really helpful. Because sometimes, yeah, you get stressed out going into a meeting and someone's first reaction is to defend themselves or, well, this is why I did it. This is why I did it. You know, but that sometimes it's not important, right? It's that emotional thing. And they're not delivering it to you to hurt your feelings. They're not delivering it to you. I mean, some people do, right? There's definitely those people out there.
Yeah.
But most are not trying to hurt you. And I'd say even I'm going to give an extra tip on that, because this is something that I've learned is that as I get excited about things, which people might recognize mine and your personality with this, because I think we're kind of all over the place with topics, but is coming with a set plan of things that you also want to say. If you're going to go into an environment that, and I do this for myself, I don't know if it's true for you, I go into an environment that I know I will get overstimulated, or I know I will get really excited, and I want to make sure there's a list of things I definitely want to hit. And there's topics I definitely want to make sure I do not forget, because I know myself that I get excited and I'll get distracted and someone will bring something else up and I'll come up with a new idea. I think having a before and after maybe would be helpful as well.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, good.
That's a great tip. Yeah, I'm that way. I zigzag all over the place with topics, and I really need to stick to like 3 bullet points.
Yeah.
Like boom, boom, boom.
Maybe our next one was just a couple topics. But no, I think this was great. Yeah. Talking about specifically, like you said, leadership, authenticity. Is there anything else that's really important to you that you would want to share with others?
Yeah. In terms of leadership, I think people, when they're starting out in their career, they're like, well, I'm low man on the totem pole. Like, how do I develop leadership skills or things like that? And I was really fortunate to, and I still am, to serve on nonprofit committees and boards. And that to me was how I developed as a leader and working with people and making decisions. Because honestly, when you're starting out in your career, probably the first 5 years, you're not going to be the person who truthfully makes big decisions. You're always going to have to run it up the ladder, and you're just roll in the trust that you have. They're not going to have that in you. But when you go to a nonprofit and you sit on a committee or you sit on a board or you're volunteering and you're passionate about it, they need you to be a leader. They need you to roll up your sleeves, work events, put an event together, go raise money. That's scary, right? And at 25 years old, I started a nonprofit, the Future City competition, which I love, from scratch. And I had to be calling engineering companies and things and asking them for money and trying to explain to them like why it was a good cause and dealing with all these unique situations. So I would just say, listen, if you feel like you want to build leadership experience, but your company can't do it, just supplement it by, volunteering. And that really helped me tremendously.
That's a really, really interesting point. And now as you've been talking through it, I'm trying to find ways in my life. I'm like, okay, that makes sense. Because when I was, whether I was in college or in high school or whatever, I always had this personality, I guess, of the entrepreneur without knowing it was an entrepreneur type characteristic. I think now that I am one, I think it makes sense. But yeah, when you are, I was a part of a family-owned company before. I'm only going to go so high. I'm only going to get so much management over X other people. I've been at other companies that there's a large corporate firm. It takes a long time to get to the top, and you want to be stimulated in these areas that you can be a leader and see maybe even if you're good at it before you're there, because sometimes people figure they get put into management positions and they're not supposed to be in management positions. So yeah, going to a Habitat for Humanity, going and sitting on a board like that, I could see how in my own journey, I've done things like that and they've been very rewarding, because you also feel cool too. If you stay in that spot of not being able to make decisions, part of you really wants that you really, really want to be able to do that. And you like when people are excited about the decisions or the types of things you want to change. And a board like that would be excited because maybe they don't have the group or the people there to make those decisions. And they look at you as, oh, wow, look at Bill. He's going to whip us all into shape. Maybe it's a church group. Maybe it's whatever it is, that you have these skills that maybe they didn't have before that they really appreciate, even though you are considered green or lower on the totem pole.
Yes, 100%.
I like that. Okay. That's good to know. I like that. Great. Well, yeah, I think that's it with personal branding goals. Yeah, we talked about a lot of different things. So thank you, Bill. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. This was a lot of fun. It was like we were just sitting down talking, and no, it was fantastic. It's a great format, and I hope people got out of it.
Yeah, I think
got
we
a
will.
lot
I
out
think
of
we'll
it.
have to listen back through, me and you, as we hear exactly all the different, we talked about so many different topics. There's got to be a few things that people will take from it. And then, we'll pick another topic in a couple months and see how you're doing and how I'm doing and do it again. But yes, thank you. And then another thing too, for those of you that do not know Bill Sutton, maybe you've seen him on LinkedIn or you've seen him out and about at networking events. Bill, if people want to get in contact with you, if maybe they did, take something from your story here today, what would you say would be a good way to get in contact?
I think LinkedIn's probably the most easy. Certainly
Okay.
search me out on there or shoot me an email. And
Okay.
it's wsutton@rsmowery.com.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm one of those people, I'm always willing to help out or get you connected or however I can help. So
Yes, that is such a true characteristic. He's not just saying that. He'll get you connected with whoever you want. You take a lot out of that. So thank you again, Bill. I really appreciate it. This was a lot of fun. And hopefully we can do it again soon. All right.
yes.
See ya.
See you later. Bye-bye.
Want to follow along? Be sure to subscribe to listen to our latest episodes.